Good evening. Welcome back to Calgary City Council. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. On the roll, Councillor Ward. Here. Councillor Wyness. Here. Was that a remote yes? Thank you. Councillor Ewell. Here. Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Chabot.
Present.
Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Dhaliwal. Councillor Dhaliwal, are you online? Councillor Jameson.
Present.
Councillor Johnston.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor McLean.
Here.
Councillor Pantazopoulos. Councillor Schmidt. Councillor Tyers. And Mayor Farkas.
Here.
Thank you, Mayor.
So we're just going to play a little bit of catch up. There may have been folks whose name we called, but we're not here yet in person. Is there anyone in the audience with us who is on any of the panels from 1 through 24 and haven't had their name called? Great, so I think we have 2 individuals. Please come on up. So we have 2 out of the 5 for the next panel. I'm going to start listing off some names, starting with panel 25. Do we have Ryan Anderson with us? Christian Ramesh? Ashish Panda? Jonas Cornelson? Come on up, Jonas. Ryan Cairns, Donna Ogston, Brian Weatherell. Come on down, Brian. I think that makes for 5, and for our guests, you can just approach the podium one by one, and each of you have 5 minutes. If you don't mind just identifying yourself and sharing which panel number you are on so we can keep track.
Hi everyone, my name is Becky Poshman. I'm on panel 18. I was flying while everything was going on, so I got here as quickly as I could. So the reason I wanted to come and present at this hearing is to provide perspective as a former counselor's assistant in a ward that has and continues to see its fair share of 4-dwelling unit RCG applications. Now, I must preface, I have not been keeping current with planning following this last election, nor have I been following much of the public hearing proceedings. So please do what you with the information that I'm sharing. Although my tenure in the office was less than 2 years, I managed the planning portfolio during the first year of the RCG, in which RCG has been recognized as the lowest density land use district. Working for an inner city ward, our office was circulated on several development permit applications weekly, many of which were for discretionary row house townhouse developments. Since this hearing is mostly centered around the 4-unit row house townhouse type built forms, that's when I reference RCG, that's pretty much the built form that I'm referring to. I will say the office did not receive comment from community members on all RCG applications, but when we did, community members would come out in droves. A lot of the time, we were asked, what can the counselor do for us? And unfortunately, my answer to most was, not a lot. As a planner and someone who has dedicated the past 10 years of their career to helping and advocating for community, responding with these nothing emails was painful. I would do my best to advocate on their behalf, especially for those applications that had dozens of comments attached to it, or the feedback was what I considered reasonable. But more often than not, when I would approach administration, they would tell us that these comments are being taken into consideration, so on and so forth. With this being the common response, I grew tired of trying to collaborate and work with administration because I found it to be a waste of time for me and those impacted by the proposed change. The only thing I was left with was explaining community members of their option to appeal an approval. I provided information as to the approach I would take with an appeal, explaining that the best argument was to reference the Municipal Government Act, the city statutory plans like the MDP or an LAP if their community had one, or earlier sections of the land use bylaw. I informed them that these documents are the policies and procedures the city should, shall, must be abiding by, yet oftentimes many of these should, shall, must policies and procedures were not being enforced because Calgary's in a housing crisis and we need to build more houses. Do you understand the frustration this process has caused hundreds, if not thousands, of Calgarians? The RCG built form do not align with most policies and bylaws because due diligence was not completed to amend these policies and procedures to align with the desperate need to build more housing. I say this as someone who has worked through and pinpointed policies and bylaws to seek alignment, but not finding that alignment. This is a point I really want to drive forward. I believe the reason the blanket rezoning has not been the success it intended to be is due to the policies and plans of which are developed through rigorous engagement and are not delivering what the participants were promised, and anyone can build anything no matter the cost to those directly impacted by the change. Now, prior to the blanket approach, I do believe the need to rezone land to accommodate RCD built forms was a hindrance on increasing the housing stock, and oftentimes these types of land use applications would sail through the planning process with little fanfare unless it was contentious or an amendment to a policy was being considered. But what I find frustrating is the total disregard of a row house townhouse being a discretionary use. When I make a decision, I apply discretion. I consider all aspects of what my decision, whether positive or negative, will have on what I am working on. File managers get to apply discretion, but that discretion is subjective. They aren't providing discretion as to whether the application fits within the context of the block, whether policies other than the blatantly obvious ones are supporting it, and whether or not the quality of those neighboring the property are affected, nor are they listening to those that are providing evidence that an approval would be detrimental to the block. I appreciate that my time is running low, so if there are any councillors that want to ask me more questions regarding any of my suggestions, I would appreciate that, but if not, then so be it. But I will start to provide some of my suggestions. First, file managers must have more discretion to reject applications or suggest significant amendments when community feedback is reasonable and identifies valid impacts where policies are not being achieved, and when rules and bylaws, and I mean all bylaws, not just land use, cannot be achieved. Allowing a file manager to only provide discretion on subjective issues such as opaque window coverings is not what many of these registered professional planners went to school for. I appreciate that amendments cost money, but let's make design great, not mediocre. Additionally, using the planning liaisons to work with the community associations and impacted neighbors to create solutions rather than just accept what is being applied for. And I see my time's up, so.
Thank you so much, Becky.
Yeah.
Ask our next presenter to come up, and you can just come in the order that you're seated.
Kisimanto, kawechina no anot, kawechiminan, kigwe kutumat. I say now in English so you can translate it. I am a Cree woman, and I asked the Creator to be with us now to address this incredible humanitarian crisis. That's what I asked in Cree. My name is Linda Johnson. I am a renter in Ward 4. I am a Cree woman originally from northern Manitoba. I turn 81 this April rather. And I am the secretary of the Northwest chapter of Acorn. I'm speaking at City Hall for the very first time. I say, do not repeal the blanket rezoning approved by City Council back in 2024 and pair it with a serious investment in real affordable housing and a municipal landlord licensing program to protect renters. We are in an affordable housing crisis, no doubt about it. In this city, we are in a crisis where people have no place to call home. And I've talked to thousands of people who've said that. We look outside, we can see it on this main step out here. We are in a crisis of affordable living. This affects Indigenous Calgarians disproportionately, at least by 41%. It's been said. I think it's higher. You know, for the homeless population in this city, and this is Indigenous land. We need to use every tool available to address these crises. That includes keeping blanket rezoning. That includes keeping blanket rezoning, but also about addressing affordability, not just building more units. It is my experience in speaking with many people, many, that affordability is a paramount. It's my issue and thousands of others, thousands. Most people are struggling to put food on the table or even afford transit fare to go get the food. One lady told me she walked 8 blocks to get a bag full of groceries because she couldn't afford the bus fare. And she does that almost every month, every time she needs groceries. Keeping blanket rezoning will not solve the housing crisis or create the affordable housing that is direly needed, but repealing will make housing more expensive across the board. The shortage of affordable housing also plays a role in the increasing domestic violence issue that women and children face in this city, and that is on the rise. Low and middle income families suffer the most in an affordable and housing crisis. When there's no place to go to that you can afford, renters are forced to put up with landlord harassment and horrible, horrible living conditions. And I know you all might have, if not, come with us on April 24th. You will see. Women and children in abusive situations are often unable to escape the violence. I have talked to women who say that landlords even harass them because they know they have no place to go and use that against them as women. There are also stories for me, and I say this sincerely, that in the sex trade, the young people and women are harassed and manipulated because they do not have a place to go. That's the kind of manipulation that goes on in this city. And it's huge. It's getting larger all the time because the housing issue is such a paramount issue. Renters are afraid to bring forward any issues regarding housing to their landlord out of fear of losing their housing, so they put up with whatever, all the manipulation and whatever, because there are no alternatives. If you are dependent on your abusive landlord or abusive partner for housing, you are most likely to stay in an unfit situation or unsafe situation. This is not what our city should strive for. Lots of options for the rich, but none for the poor. The rich have the say, the poor have no voice. We must strive to create options and possibilities for everyone. We must look after our brothers and sisters. The reason we are in this crisis now is because that hasn't happened. For these reasons, Calgary must not repeal housing policy that helps build more homes faster, but this must also be paired with a serious investment in real affordable housing. Affordable.
Thank you, Linda. Unfortunately, you're at time, but
you.
please don't go far in case there may be questions for you. Thank you. We'll ask our next panelist to please approach the podium.
I want to thank Mayor Farkas and the rest of council for having this, giving us the opportunities to speak. I live in Lakeview. I've lived there for over 45 years. And I want you to know that the last council believed that nobody drove. Well, that's false. There are only 2 ways in and out of Lakeview. This is a cut, and it's also a cut-through for people to get further along on Glenmore Trail. Soon, Satina will have completed their development, which is housing, and we will be forced to have them come into our neighborhood as well, which makes the roads extremely difficult. Right now, we have adequate parking. We have mixed apartments and different housing units in our neighborhood, as Louise has mentioned previously. But one of the big things for me is the depletion of the urban forest that's happening in our neighborhood. So houses are being removed, as are the mature trees that are under construction, the houses under construction, as well as trees in neighboring properties that nobody seems to be addressing. The developers present plans for approval, and when they are approved, they often come back to amend the plans. Overdevelopment means more garbage containers in the alley, which impedes travel. The roads are full of cars, which will also impede emergency vehicles. The houses that are being built are anything but affordable. And I believe your planners have never looked at individual situations in neighborhoods and the impact that more housing will cause. We live on North Glenmore Park, so as many of you would know, that park is a well-used park, which means there's no parking at Weaselhead, there's no parking in the park, and they are spilling over into our streets. Not that I object to that. I'm glad that they're using our park. Yesterday, a sign went up for a 3-story house on 66th Avenue with 8 units. This will mean 5 will be built in Lakeview on 66th Avenue. Our schools are at full capacity, and our roads are often too crowded to enable people to leave their street in a timely manner. The other thing that we want to know, we also, because we're on the Weaselhead, we are a bear community. So we're often asked to put our garbage cans in our garages. Well, if you only have parking for half a car for each unit in a duplex, in a 8-person place, where are you going to put those garbage cans? Because I've never seen half a car. So the bus service that once was very good in Lakeview has been changed. And now you cannot get home from Chinook Center past 6 o'clock on Sunday. That's what happened when I moved there. And then we had fantastic bus service, which has gone by the wayside. And we have to do many transfers to get to different places within the city. We're not on the LRT, but the city wanted us to take a bus to the LRT to get downtown. They had buses that ran tandem every day at 7 to 8 in the morning and in the afternoon to take the residents downtown. Personally, I wouldn't let my grandkids ride on the C train unaccompanied. So I'm asking you, please, to appeal the bylaw in its totality and look at every situation individually so that we can have a neighborhood that we can all live in and enjoy. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for being with us. We'll ask our next panelist to please approach.
Good evening, Council. My name is Jonas Cornelson. I live in Crescent Heights in Ward 7, and I commute to work in Evanston in Ward 2 by bike or bus. These long journeys inform my perspective on how our city is built, and I appreciate the chance to share a few thoughts on the future of housing in Calgary, which informs the future of everything else: affordability, transit, water infrastructure, etc. When I signed up, I ticked off that my position was against the repeal of rezoning for housing. And while I do still believe that gently densifying the whole city is important, and I'm sad to lose progress in this regard, I'm sensitive to the politics of it here. I understand that how the previous council went about this read to many of my fellow Calgarians as too far, too fast. Many raised concerns then and are still doing so now. And while I disagree with some of these concerns, I do not dismiss them entirely. We are all neighbors. We need to find ways to move forward together. And so I'm not expecting citywide rezoning will stay as it is. Many of you were, of course, elected on promises to repeal it. What I am asking is for you, City Council, and really all my fellow Calgarians to try again and find a middle option that respects concerns about the pace and scale of change, but still moves us toward a city that has housing where we need it and is more tax efficient. What do I mean by tax efficient? This is a key point. We've relied on outward growth for so long, and we've gotten to the point where we have way too much infrastructure to maintain with each household paying a modest tax rate. We have, if I'm correct, the most water pipe per person for big cities in Canada, and we all know where that's gotten us. The expert report into the June 2024 Bearspaw South water main failure cited growing the city footprint without enough attention to maintenance as a key factor in why we've gotten to where we are, facing an infrastructure deficit of tens of billions of dollars in Calgary. And the best way to raise revenue without large tax hikes is to house more people where we've already built infrastructure. Yes, some of it will need upgrades, but life cycle maintenance happens anyway, and much of that isn't paying for itself right now because of older communities that have declined from their peak population. I'm not blaming anyone who lives in these communities, but now that we know better, we have to build better. Primarily building new communities on the edge of the city doesn't make us tax efficient, and that hurts our ability to be a thriving city. This council is also commendably working to improve Calgary transit. I know from a lot of experience that the bus service to our new northern communities is unreliable, and I don't want to see it stretched even thinner. By keeping more growth in established areas long term, we can improve and invest in every other service that we are struggling to fund now. That's tax efficiency. I also mentioned housing where we need it. As I said, I live in Ward 7, which has some of the densest and most walkable parts of Calgary. Lots of people seem to like that. However, rents remain higher there than other areas because of limited options for building new housing where we need it. Edge growth doesn't help make the inner city affordable because it's not close enough to the places and amenities that people either need, like students being close to university, or want. Demand will always stay high, no matter how many units are built halfway to Airdrie. We need to keep gently densifying the inner city so that more housing stays available where we need it. Yes, people will ask, what about the parking and the trees? Calgary, there will be some growing pains of becoming the city of the future. But with investments in transit, we may eventually see more one-car families. I don't like streets clogged with parked cars either. We can plant new trees, and with gentle density, we may be able to preserve more farmland and wetlands on the edge of the city. Those places matter too, and it breaks my heart when I see more ranches, forests, and prairies sacrificed to sprawl. I'm convinced this moment is not a one or the other scenario. For example, as I understand it, Council's current proposed zoning plan identifies the 3 lots at the end of any block as potentially appropriate for townhouses. So let's bake that in as a permitted use so you don't need a public hearing every time. What if R1 lots become R2 with secondary or laneway suites instead of jumping all the way to RCG? A staged approach like that still moves the needle on housing without moving it so far. And just a quick reminder that permitted uses aren't required uses. Single-family homes are just fine, and there will still be lots of them. But as we're seeing with our infrastructure deficit, to only be able to build single houses by default in most places is simply not fiscally sustainable over the long term. Council and Calgary, I am willing to accept the lessons of 2024's rezoning for housing being too far, too fast for many. But if you feel you must repeal, I am begging for us not to go back to where we were before. We need to generate more tax revenue within established areas so that we can invest in the services that make our city one of the best places to live. We have options. Let's please explore them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Come on up.
Well, good evening, Your Worship, Mayor Farkas and City Councilors. My name is Brian Weatherell. I'm a resident homeowner in Ward 7. In this hearing so far, we've heard a myriad of reasons to repeal blanket rezoning, reasons that I agree with. Today, I will add one more reason that has not been addressed so far as I know. I'm here to talk about a broken promise. In my hand is instrument RC 4113. This is a legally binding restrictive covenant executed in 1963 by the Deputy Mayor of the City of Calgary, the legendary Honorable Dr. Grant McEwen. This contract is a promise from the City of Calgary to the residents of my neighborhood, University Heights, that our community would be reserved for single-family homes. But in 2024, when the City Council passed the blanket rezoning bylaw, they didn't just change the map. They unilaterally breached their own signed contract. So I'm here to ask this council to honor the city's word, respect our land titles, repeal the blanket rezoning, and return to an orderly planning process, one that allows contextual infill densification in the communities where it makes sense, and one that respects the law and the land titles and the integrity of the city. This legal reality is but one example of how blanket rezoning ignores the specific needs of an individual community. My wife, Lilo, and I have lived and raised a family in University Heights for 39 years. We didn't just buy a house, we bought into a neighborhood secured and guaranteed by a perpetual contract. We valued an inner-city residential neighborhood with a high quality of life, peaceful, quiet community atmosphere, mature, established tree-lined streets, and connectivity without congestion. But during the 2024 rezoning hearing, one critic claimed, "You only buy a house, not a neighborhood." To that type of response or comment, my response is, read the contract. My land title says otherwise. The City of Calgary is a direct signatory to the covenant registered on my land title, and by applying the RGC zoning over our titles, the city is knowingly creating a legal contradiction. The City Planning Department may find these covenants inconvenient, but it cannot unilaterally revoke them. These restrictive covenants have been upheld by the Alberta courts repeatedly because they are contracts, not just guidelines. The Land Titles Act does, in fact, allow for a court-ordered discharge of these covenants under certain circumstances. However, it does not grant the city the power to unilaterally ignore the contracts through a bylaw. Ignoring the restrictive covenants by the city is not just bad policy, it's an abdication of the city's duty as a signatory to these very contracts. And one final point, if I may. At the outset of this hearing on Monday morning, the city's planning general manager, in her introductory remarks, stated, "Thoughtful planning is essential for achieving the future vision for this city." And I agree with that statement, the key words being thoughtful planning. However, the blanket zoning put in place last year is not thoughtful planning. It, in fact, is the exact opposite. It's an abrogation of planning responsibility. It allows the future growth to be driven by a wide-open free-for-all in the hands of commercial builders and developers, which completely disregards any thoughtful planning that communities may have done through their local area development planning and citizen engagement processes. Blanket RCG rezoning is, in effect, a complete absence of planning. In conclusion, I would say the following. In 2024, the previous City Council ignored the overwhelming majority of public opposition to blanket rezoning, resulting in a broken trust. Mayor Farkas, you and many on this council campaigned on restoring that trust by repealing blanket rezoning. I commend you and the current council for its leadership and decisive action to fix the recent broken pipeline water feeder main. Now I call upon you to take further decisive action and fix the broken promise and the broken trust created by the blanket rezoning fiasco. I urge you to honor the signature of Dr. Grant McEwen, respect the sanctity of our land titles, and return Calgary to a planning process that values certainty, community integrity, and the rule of law. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for being here. We'll ask our final panelist to please approach. Or actually, we've heard from all five of you. Whoops. That went quick. All right, so we have a speaker's queue. Councillor Johnston, please.
Mr. Jonas, please. Sorry, what's your definition of gentle density?
You know, it could vary. I would say, so I'm from Winnipeg. They recently have passed a rezoning that allows for up to 4 units on a general city parcel. So I would say, I mean, my personal feelings as someone who enjoys living in dense cities, yeah, 4 to 8. But in terms of, like, I'm trying to thread a needle here, right? Like, I'm trying to understand that we all have to come to some sort of agreement together-ish. It's not going to please everyone. But I have to imagine that a duplex, perhaps a small secondary suites where, yeah, it might be an older relative, it might be a student who's not driving, et cetera. I have to imagine that would be more palatable to more Calgarians than blanket RCG in the whole city. Does that kind of make sense? Like, I want to find a bit of a middle ground there.
Okay, so more of a compromise density.
Yeah, like maybe roughly 4 units on a standard parcel as a permitted use, and you know, of course, with discretionary uses or with applications on top of that, if a lot allowed for it, if there was that context.
4 dwellings or 4 units?
I'm not sure I understand the difference.
Neither do I. I was hoping you
We're
could tell
learning.
me.
We're learning together, my friend.
Don't know.
I'm thinking like, let's say a duplex, like a side-by-side with each primary unit having a secondary suite. So that's four places where an individual household could live.
I agree. Okay, so that would be an RC2 then.
Something like an R2, yeah.
Cool. All right, thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Over to Councillor Chabot.
Ms. Poshman.
Hi.
Hi, I assume you had more to say.
Of course, I always have more to say. When have I never had less to say? So I left off by just talking about file managers having more discretion and using the planning liaisons that are in place to help drive those conversations and listening to what community members are saying. A lot of the feedback that the office I worked for received were valid points that were being made. A lot of the comments were not saying oppose the application because we don't want this here. It was too dense for what that block was, what was already situated on the block. So I did review the proposed amendments should the repeal go forward, and I do like the reintroduction of that contextual front setback. Because right now, with that 3-meter front setback next to a property that might have a 7.5-meter front setback, we got a 4.5-meter setback difference, which is quite substantial. And I have had conversations with residents who originally supported the blanket rezoning in 2024, come forward and say that this drastic increase in front setback, or decrease in front setback, if you wish, results in safety concerns. Parents are losing sight lines of their children playing and walking along the sidewalk, crossing the street. So children are losing their independence. I know that sounds very silly, but in the grand scheme of things, if we keep adding on to this, then people aren't going to want to have their children walk outside because there is that level of unsafety. So when I look at a contextual front setback, I think what a file manager needs to do in applying discretion is really assess what the current housing stock on that block is. If the properties to the east and west, if we're looking at an avenue, were built 10, 15 years ago, we can assume that those houses aren't going anywhere anytime soon. And those properties typically have that 7.5-meter front setback because it was contextual to those earlier bungalows. And this is more on inner city north. So that's kind of where that I believe that would help alleviate some of the pressures that we're seeing when it comes to the fourplexes being introduced. I do support fourplexes being located on corners. I do support fourplexes and greater and HGOs being located on your elbow drives, on your 20th Avenues Northwest. Those streets are designed to support that type of housing.
Sorry, when you say fourplex, you mean 4+4?
Yeah, the 4x4s.
Okay.
Whether it's a 2-building or a 1-building with the garage.
So you're not overly supportive of the idea of reducing it down to 3?
Honestly, I think it has to be a case-by-case basis at that point, because especially when we're talking mid-block, and if it's the first introduction to that block, it's a drastic change that a lot of residents are having to get used to. I think that another suggestion is the garage. We've heard from one of the speakers that and many residents or many community members, that these garages don't fit cars, and people who have vehicles aren't necessarily parking in these garages, they're parking on the streets. But if I remember correctly, if a garage isn't provided or a carport, then the property has a reduction in their lot coverage by 25%, I want to say. So without the garage, they have to shrink the dwelling unit portion of the buildings. But with a garage, then they get their maximum lot coverage at that 65%. So why not just eliminate the need for the garage, push that second building to flank the laneway, activate the laneway so that you have sight lines happening on the front and the back of the property, and then you have more of the buildings aligned with existing garage accessory buildings and a better courtyard feel for people living in these properties.
So, and through your presentation, you talked about some of the experiences that you had in the counselor's office, although you weren't specific about which counselor.
I'm not stating. Some of you know, some of you don't. That's good.
Anyways, so I'm not 100% clear. Are you for repealing or against repealing?
I'm neutral. Because if I say I'm against it, then I'm painted in one light. If I say I'm for it, then I'm painted in another light. I think that there are improvements that can be made to the RCG land use district, but seeing that there is a new zoning bylaw that's kind of coming to fruition as well, and again, I've not been looking at anything planning since October. The H1, H2, H3 districts are the exact same as RCG, so on and so forth. So H1 equals RCG as it currently is today. So what we can do is use this as a lessons learned. This was an experiment. Did the experiment work? Yes and no. Did we build more housing? Yes. But is it working? Not necessarily. I think that we need to really focus on the local area plans that are in place, because when I was a part of the working group for the Heritage Local Area Plan, there were really good conversations as to where 3-plexes, 4-plexes should be located. It should be near transit stations. It should be along transit routes. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the center of the community. Am I saying that we should only build single detached in the center of the community? No, but maybe let's mix in some semi-detached rather than going straight for the 4x4s or the 6x6s, so on and so forth.
And because she said heritage, that doesn't mean that that's the ward she represented.
No. I've lived in Ward 7, 8, 11, and now I'm in 14. So I've seen the city. I know the city really well. I was passionate about planning, but that passion has since left, unfortunately, due to the way in which our city is being planned right now. And it's disheartening, and it's quite sad. But I think we need to focus on RCG in communities that are amenity rich, not necessarily just inner city. We've got inner city communities their schools are now bursting at the seams. So people who are moving to inner city to not have a vehicle and for their children to walk to school are potentially having their children bussed out of their communities. And it seems counterintuitive to living inner city, but then you're bussed out. And it's no different than being on the outskirts and kids being bussed in. So why not look at your 1960s and 70s communities? I lived in Southwood. I've always been an advocate for boosting density in that community because the potential there is phenomenal and it's slowly coming. But there are plenty of schools. It is one of the most amenity-rich communities in the area, and transit is there. You've got C-Train, you've got really strong bus routes. So I'm always about spreading out that density rather than focusing, like what's happened now is, as we know, Calgary's growing concentrically, and we get to the outer limits, and now we're moving back into the center and we're moving concentrically out. But we already have a footprint, so why not find those communities, those hot spots, so you have your 37th Streets in Killarney, all that area, and then you have your elbow drives, and then you have all these other great streets that have the potential, and these communities that have the potential to become something special.
Sounds like a very complex undertaking.
It seems complex, but it seems simple because there's local area plans that are there to help guide where development should be going.
Yeah. So you're suggesting then that we use local area plans to determine where we should be initiating land use designations?
Yes, and but also making sure that the LAPs aren't prescriptive and copy and pasted as we have been seeing them, that the working groups need to be able to ensure that policies are reflective of the communities that make up those local area plans, so that the policies in Heritage LAP shouldn't be the same as the Riley LAP, which shouldn't be the same as the East Calgary LAP, for instance. They're different, they're completely different areas of the city. And if we continue on this trajectory, it's just cookie cutter, and Calgary's just going to be the same throughout. And what people like about other cities when they travel to them is unique communities. And yes, we do have some unique communities, but those are slowly dissipating because everything old is getting torn down for something new and sparkly, because that's the Calgary way.
And listen, we could have this, we could go on all
I know.
night. Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving us your perspective, and appreciate
Thank you.
what you had to say. I have no further questions for you, but thank you.
Thanks.
Could go on all night, and we will. Councillor Chabot. Councillor Ward, please.
I'm so sorry. Becky, could you come back? You and I could talk for literally hours. I think you have really good insight. Yeah, we might actually. One of the things that I thought was, well, okay, let's go the other way. You talked about recommendations that you have. If you can give me a quick hit on like maybe your top 3. Quick hit.
My recommendations is providing file managers with the ability to actually have discretion and rejecting an application if it does not fit within the context of the community, and if the MDP policies are not being achieved. That is the guiding document. That's what we have to work towards, and many applications do not achieve the MDP. Is it dated? Some can say yes, some can say no, but that's part of the due diligence that wasn't completed when the blanket rezoning originally took place, was amending the MDP to reflect this drastic change in land use districts. So that's number 1. The MGA also has to be followed, because that's the top one. Hierarchy, right? We have to go into that hierarchy. That contextual front setback, I do believe, can make or break, is what's making or breaking a lot of these developments. I appreciate that there is a cost associated with not necessarily rejecting an application, but pushing it back for further amendments and fine-tuning it, because a lot of the times these applicants are coming in at the end of their budget. But that shouldn't be the community's fault or the file manager's fault. That's the designer's prerogative for pushing the budget and just going through with that final product. Yeah. And if an application is discretionary, it is open for comment. That's what discretionary also means. So when the community is coming forward and actually providing reasonable and valid comments that are affecting the quality of life, their personal quality of life, could be their garden that they've spent 30 plus years growing, and they have a significant concern because of shadowing, that's something that needs to be taken into consideration, because that's their investment. And just because the developer has an investment as well, why do we have to weigh them so differently?
It's interesting you say all this, because, and I think we have a few Lakeview residents in the house tonight, but we get a lot of emails, especially from Lakeview residents, about some of the issues that you're bringing up. And when we brought this up with the planning department, we were told, well, it follows the land use, so we're going to approve it. Mm-hmm. So basically, you can submit anything, and it doesn't matter. And that's really disheartening, because then I go to these Lakeview residents and I tell them this, and, you know, bless their hearts, they're quite kind to us because they understand that our hands are tied, but it's frustrating that, like, what's the point of submitting a comment?
But when I spoke about bylaws not aligning, and we look at just the waste bylaw, for instance, it defines multi-residential differently than the land use bylaw defines it. And if it's been updated since October, I apologize, but this is where I'm a few months behind, so I apologize. But that's, to me, these are things that need to align, because waste management is an issue when we have 4 dwelling units and 4 secondary suites, because that does result in 12 additional bins in the backyard when there just used to be 3. Again, they're silly little things, but
they all
more and more
too.
on the block do add up to more congestion. Right. And then that determines whether or not people are going to want to park in their alley or in their laneway or on their property, because they can't even access it due to bins being everywhere. So it's it's not just the building itself, it's the other bylaws. It's the fact that if a tree is destroyed or cut down, even though the plans say it will be protected, it's a slap in the hand and a fine.
Yeah.
But why aren't we protecting these mature trees that have a value? They have a dollar amount for them, whether it's $6,000 or up to $48,000. Fine that developer that amount of money. So this doesn't just stop at the development permit process, and it doesn't just stop at the building permit process. It continues on beyond that. And what I'm frustrated with is that we're not looking 1, 3, 5, 10 years down the line once we start introducing these developments. We're looking at today, and that's not planning. Planning is future. And when I do planning, I am looking 3, 5, 10 years into the future. I am envisioning it in my mind as to what that would look like. And it's one of my abilities that I have, but yeah, it gets really frustrating when it's just a cluster.
I get it,
and yeah, it's just,
I'll stop us there. As I said, you and I could talk for literally hours, and maybe we should. So thank you so much. And I agreed with what you said about Southwood as well. I think there's huge potential there. So awesome. Maybe send me an email. Let's connect. We could talk for hours.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson, please.
Sorry, Ms. Poshman. Thank you. Yeah, great to hear sort of about the discretionary. I think you've got some really interesting points there. Is there a certain level at which you think permitted, just like there's also some amount that we just, I think we just heard from Jonas, like about that 2+2, like is there a certain area where you think like we don't need to think about that? That's not having those levels of effect that you're sort of bringing up in your presentation?
yeah, I think that RC1, RC2, I mean, that's what everyone is looking to achieve, is a single detached or semi-detached property.
Right.
I do think that they should be permitted uses as they are today. And if there is a discrepancy, then they automatically get shot into the discretionary route so that it does go out for comment. And most times, I would say 98% of the time, you're not receiving comment on those applications because they're fitting within the context of that block face. I'm not saying the entire community, but of the block that it's situated on, because
Gotcha.
I can't say Crescent Heights as a great community, but I can talk to 15th Avenue between, Edmonton Trail and 5th Street, right?
Yeah.
Because that's different than 13th Avenue between 6th Street and 7th Street, for instance. Like, they're different block fronts, so you can't treat them the same. They have to be treated differently. I'm not saying that the RCG on a corner lot makes absolute sense because you are getting better sight lines, and it does provide for safety.
Yeah, corners are a different, I guess, like on a mid-block, what would you say is like the highest sort of level of housing density on a mid-block site that you think is, it could be permitted use versus discretionary use?
I think it's a tough one. Depends on that contextual front setback, I think. I'm not a fan of having a 4.5 meter separation between a property that is not going anywhere anytime soon, that's being well maintained, that the family just recently moved into, for instance. And so they've invested their hard-earned life to afford that as well. That's where this discretion has to come in line. On 20th Avenue.
That's design details more so, but like number of units, would you go with, is it 1 + 2 suites? Is it 2 primaries with suites, like a 2 and 2?
I've never really thought into the number of dwelling units and secondary suites because I think there's better ways in which the site can be designed to maximize dwelling units. Like what I suggested with, if we don't have the garage and maybe it is a carriage house.
Pushing it back.
And then, but again, it's the number of dwelling units can be determined based on what the block is supporting. So 20th Avenue right now, you have many properties that have the two building 4x4s.
Yep.
So yeah, it's going to make sense to continue that trend down that street. But if we go one block north or one block south, that might not work out the same way. Maybe it is putting in semi-detached once we get into more of the quieter streets, because we also have to think about what can the street withstand.
Yeah.
Like an elbow drive, it can definitely support HGO. And because it has an alley to support parking.
For sure.
But once you go in further into a community, the streets start to get narrower, and that congestion increases because people aren't parking on their properties, which they should be doing in the first place. Yeah. And then it's just adding to that chaos that everyone is not appreciative of. So again, that's where the local area plan comes in place, that the streets are studied and that we're identifying, we, the planners, not me, but administration is identifying the best location for that built form. It's hard to just say, oh, it works mid-block here. It's a really hard question to answer.
Yeah, I guess I'm
in
thinking
a blanket
about that.
sense.
I'm thinking about that like in community where you have the least density within the city, right? There's an old 1950s bungalow or whatever on that site, 50 by 120 mid-block, so there's no specialty case. This is your lowest of low density, even within an LAP. What is the right level there? And in that way, in theory, is the lowest level. Of course, you can always take down a bungalow and put up another bungalow or whatever, but what would be something that you think would be permitted on that lowest of low density in that mid-block setting?
Is the whole block then the same?
We'll say that it's, bungalows, and maybe some of them have been redone into.
Then I think that new property would have to start as a permitted use of a single detached or semi-detached to kind of set that tone. Because if you start middle with an RCG, so a 3 or 4 dwelling unit plus 4 secondary suites, then that's directing how the rest of the block goes.
Right.
It's really hard though, because it also depends on what amenities are surrounding that lot to make it make sense. Because if there aren't any amenities, why should that built form be there? Shouldn't we be building higher density closer to the amenities in order to decrease the need for private vehicle usage?
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily the case. You look at West Hillhurst, a lot of redevelopment happening in there with single semis and 4s, but it's not yes, it's a walkable community because you can get to your recreation, but from an amenity perspective, I believe there is a new grocery store in Kensington.
Fixed it now.
Pardon?
They fixed it.
Okay, so there is a new grocery store in that area.
Good.
However,
Yeah.
prior to that, where transit is not, it's not a primary transit network. And what was the closest grocery store was either up the hill in North Hill, and you have to take your life into your hands going up and down that street with groceries, or going over to Sunnyside.
Right.
And yes, it's close, but it's not close enough.
Right.
So why are we shoving all of this into one location? The same with Capitol Hill. You've got one, I like to use grocery stores as kind of my amenity because it's our day-to-day need. And it's about food security as well and having access to food. As one of the panel members here spoke, their colleague or a friend has to walk 8 blocks to get to a grocery store based on where affordable housing is located. So shouldn't we be making sure that our higher density units, which would contribute to the supply, thus decreasing demand, thus decreasing pricing, be located in better proximity to our day-to-day amenities?
Yeah, you get into a bit of chicken and egg. I think actually West Hillhurst is interesting because the grocery store came on because there's been the density. So it is this I
get that,
right?
yeah.
It's trying to build up enough density within an area that then the grocery store comes on. So no, absolutely. But it is about thinking about how do we make it so that people don't have to, truck out to get their basic sort of life pieces on. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly, please.
Ms. Johnson. The previous three councillors said that they could talk with Ms. Poshman for hours, and we pushed that. We're getting close. There's a lot of words said in the conversation that they had there, and including some things that maybe didn't sound like words, but they were words. I wanted to get your impression because, like, that conversation that we just listened to with Ms. Poshman is like, that's the planning sort of detail we're having. But as a Ward 4 neighbor, as a fellow Ward 4 neighbor, I wanted to get sort of your, a person on the ground, an actual neighbor, like your perspective on that conversation that just happened there. What was going through your mind while they were having that conversation? I'm sort of curious, was there something in there that resonated with you, or were there things in there you're like, I have no idea what they're talking about?
Okay, I recognize, and we recognize, and I say we've had many discussions in areas of like Miskama and the Alexander and all these places where people are talking about housing and the affordability of everything, groceries, gas, but in particular housing, right? And so I say, I hear everything that's being said here, and I just want, I keep thinking that we are having this discussion because there is a crisis. You know, there is people who are really homeless, people who, I mean, there's thousands who literally say they cannot afford the housing anymore. Literally, there is, you know, and somebody said something like in a neighborhood of 84,000 people say that. 84,000 people. So I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I understand the complexity of this incredible humanitarian crisis, and we are in one, you know. And so I say it is really important, you know, to all of you, that when you talk about, you know, well, what I hear is rich people or people who have the money to have a home, a private home, you know, are they really considering the ones who cannot do that? Do they really consider that? There are so many that can't.
Thank you very much for wrapping up the panel by grounding us in terms of why we're having this conversation. Appreciate it, Your Worship.
Thank you so much. That concludes this panel. We'll move now through to panel 26. Catherine, I think you're on the line with us, right?
Yes, I am. I'm tuning in remotely.
Sounds good. You will be our first panelist. Okay. I will give another shot to panel 25, Ryan Anderson, Christian Ramesh, Ashish Panda, come on down. That makes two. Ryan Cairns, are you with us? Brian Weatherell. Oh, we got you. Perfect. No, you only get one turn. That's it would be way too much fun, I think. All right, so far we have Catherine, we have Ashish. Enrico, come on down. Do we have Tala Abuyani?
Yes, here.
Great. Please stand by, Tala, please. Megan Stanwood. Perfect. All right, why don't you lead us off, Catherine?
Sounds good. Thank you very much. My name is Katherine Cook, and I'm the president of the Lakeview Community Association. I've joined the call today to represent our community, the majority of which is in favor of repealing blanket rezoning and restoring low-density residential land use to Lakeview along with contextual rules. Similar to the presenter yesterday from Lake Bonavista Residents Group, Prior to blanket rezoning, Lakeview was a great example of a community with a diverse yet cohesive mix of housing types, a planned 1960s community. Our neighborhood featured mostly single-family lots, but also had RC2 lots with duplexes along 37th Street, which is a primary corridor into Lakeview, and MCG zoning that allowed for townhouses in the heart of the community. It also included MC2 zoning, which supported medium-profile multi-residential buildings of 3 to 5 stories, such as Lakeview Muse and Lakeside Estates apartments, which are adjacent to Glenmore Trail, a busy road network. Additionally, Lakeview has commercial space integrated into the community off of Crowchild, which includes the Esso gas station and Lakeview Plaza. Collectively, these elements made Lakeview a model for how a neighborhood can successfully integrate varied housing forms alongside commercial services in a thoughtful and planned approach. Moreover, residents purchasing property in Lakeview could do so with a clear understanding of what to expect in their surroundings, as zoning provided a predictable and stable framework for future development. The upzoning bylaw has brought a lot of uncertainty into the community and haphazard planning. Residents who have lived in and contributed to the vibrancy of our community for 40 to 50 years have less property rights than developers with no long-term states. Additionally, when proposed developments comply with existing bylaw requirements, they can proceed without community input or influence. This has left some residents feeling excluded from the engagement process and concerned about the future character of our neighborhood. Proposed row house developments are pressuring adjacent homeowners to sell prematurely rather than live next to the high-density projects. Residents do not want to live next to these high-density developments and are choosing to sell before their investments deteriorate further. While city administration classifies row houses as low density, residents perceive developments of 8 to 12 units as a significant and obtrusive increase in density. The Lakeview Community Association saw a sharp increase in correspondence when 2 contentious developments were proposed in Lakeview under blanket rezoning. The first was the first 8-plex development on 66th Avenue, which generated over 800 public submissions in opposition. Sorry, I'm hearing.
We'll just ask if you are currently on the line to please make sure to mute if you're not, Catherine.
That's not my background noise.
Yeah, we want everyone besides Catherine to mute so that we can hear Catherine clearly. And I think that's sorted. Please go ahead.
Okay. So the first 8-plex had over 800 public submissions in opposition. The development was appealed at SDAB and eventually approved by the city, ignoring the concerns of Lakeview residents. The second contentious development was a subdivision on Lindstrom Drive. Over 900 people signed the petition against the proposed subdivision. And to put that into context, I think the city has received over 2,000 comments from the city of Calgary, 1.7 million people. And in our case, 900 people signed the petition, and we have 5,600 residents. So it's a significant portion of the community. What's worse is that the permitted drawings were circulated by the city before the subdivision was even approved, suggesting that the comment period was merely a check mark in the process and that residents' comments didn't matter. The subdivision was approved the day after the comment period closed. Current bylaws appear to function as an upper limit threshold for developments rather than guiding principles. In many recent applications that I've reviewed, proposals consistently approach maximum allowances for height, setbacks, lot coverage, often falling just 2 decimal places below the limit. This pattern reinforces concerns that development is being driven primarily by regulatory ceilings rather than broader considerations of community fit and impact to adjacent neighbors. Historically, most homes in Lakeview have been set back more than 3 meters, contributing to an open, green streetscape. Under the new bylaw, however, older homes now face structures built much closer to the property line, often replacing views of trees and green space with walls and garages. The current regulations do not adequately account for streetscape character or align with the local neighborhood context. The current approach to blanket upzoning risks undermining the very qualities that made Lakeview a model community. It replaces coordinated planning with a one-size-fits-all framework, diminishes meaningful public engagement, and prioritizes maximum build-out over compatibility with the existing neighborhood. The result is no thoughtful intensification, but piecemeal change that erodes streetscape character, destabilizes longstanding communities and displaces residents who have invested decades into making Lakeview what it is today. To avoid a flood of new development applications, the LCE would like to see repeal apply to any new properties after the first reading. In terms of the changes proposed to RCG, we believe that the city is muddying the water by including it in this hearing process. This is a separate issue that should be dealt with at a separate hearing after proper public engagement. We urge council to repeal blanket rezoning and restore targeted densification as well as public trust, a vital component of responsible city planning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Catherine. All right, Ashish, coming up.
By the way, I did have a few slides. I don't know if that could be set up. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just ask if you don't mind maybe moving closer to one of the mics or redirecting them to you so we can make sure we can hear you.
All right. Hi, Council. I'm Ashish Panda, and I'm a young Calgarian who's concerned about the future of the city. The housing crisis is seen as one of the biggest roadblocks to future prosperity for younger generations, and I urge Council to recognize the hopelessness that is spreading due to backtracking on this file. Next slide. I believe that the gentle upzoning of all residential land to RCG encourages the market to decide where housing is needed most while displaying a stronger fiscal framework by encouraging more efficient use of land and taxpayer dollars. It's not just my belief, though. It is objective truth that has been found by the city all the way back in 2009 with the cost of growth study, as well as by third parties like the Fraser Institute. RCG rezoning has support federally, including from the Conservative Party's Housing Shadow Minister, Scott Aitchison. Let's be clear, there's no debate on the merits of RCG rezoning as a beneficial housing affordability policy. There's consensus across party lines and among policy experts. Next slide. If this council is serious about addressing housing for young people, it would be implementing all the recommendations made by the city's own Housing and Affordability Task Force, instead of repealing the ones it has already put in place. Now to Councillor Johnston, I'm a resident of Ward 14, and I appreciate your genuine intention to serve us and the city well.
I'm just going to jump in. I've been asking through the public hearing not to call out individual members of council or city staff.
Okay, well, I'm just a resident of Ward 14, that's all I was really saying. And yeah, okay, I need to go next. So, okay, about so-called members here that call themselves fiscal conservatives, I think it isn't right to call yourselves that if you want to add more red tape, more bureaucratic inefficiencies, and insert stronger government mandates over property rights, all to increase housing prices and our infrastructure deficit. I guess it's us young people who will be picking up the tax bill and overspending on housing. And next slide. I'm disappointed that council is looking to follow in the steps that led to the housing crises in Toronto and Vancouver, focusing only on nodes and corridors, when we could instead look to emulate the policies that have led to real results with lower housing prices in places like Edmonton, despite record-breaking population growth. They recently had a similar situation where they almost took a few steps back on housing policy, but cooler heads eventually prevailed and they voted to maintain their pro-housing and pro-affordability initiative. Overtaxing and overregulating the exact commodity we need is never the right answer. The previous zoning bylaw wasted precious taxpayer time and increased costs for everyone. In the words of a former councillor, next slide, land use redesignations took 6 months. Next slide again. So yeah, land use redesignations took 6 months at City Hall, and City Council approved those applications, next slide, 95% of the time. And that 6 months delay was causing, on average, next slide, $50,000 price increase to the average home being built under these guidelines. The unaffordability of houses can directly be drawn to how terrible that old process was, end quote. Next slide. I beg of you to pursue the results you want to see. If you want a needless bureaucratic burden that acts as a tax on home building during a housing crisis, if you want to drive away young people, if you want to take away more money from people's pockets in increasing rent and mortgages instead of to local businesses and the economy, if you want to increase taxes and add more long-term debt, go right ahead with repealing rezoning. If that isn't the result you want to see, then I hope you take a moment to reconsider. The best option is maintaining RCG rezoning and moving on to tackling the rest of the Housing and Affordability Task Force recommendations. No picking and choosing, no delaying and repealing. Also, as an aside though, if you do repeal RCG, please make sure to have a contingency that is not just going back to the previous R1 zoning. For example, permitted duplexes plus secondary and backyard suites as a compromise. Next slide. We are at an inflection point, and I, along with 69% of Calgarians, also aged 18 to 24, am counting on you, our City Council, to make the right decision that will bring down costs and allow for more opportunities in this great city. To look forwards, not backwards. Thank you, and thank you. The next slide, but thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. Enrico, are you ready for us?
Yes and no.
I think that applies to all of us around here.
Good evening, Council. I submitted my written comment. You may have it before you. I don't know if I should save you some time and not read it to you. You can check it on your own. I'll briefly go ahead and make my statement. There was a lot of things that occurred and were listening in the last 2 days that really made my blood boil. The idea that some of us seniors ended up with our homes because it was given to us and you accumulated wealth. I'll tell you, 3-4 jobs working for next to nothing in order to be able to save a dime like your parents, your grandparents, to finally have the home that you have today. My first job in Calgary, I was here 1 week. I was 7 years old. Mr. Stewart let me have my first job, okay? At 12 years of age, I was supposed to be 18, laying pipe. And by the way, I installed the utilities in all of Lakeview as a summer job. I was 14 and 15 at the time. So the immigrants that came, we helped build this country. It was not handed to us. And I was proud to say that in '56, to this day, most of my great friends are Hungarian, Canadian, and I love them for being who they are. If you want an example of democracy and input from your constituency, I know I will get myself into trouble, but Jeremy was a perfect example of listening to your constituents, and I'm really proud of that today he is mayor.
You know, I'm going to appreciate the compliments, but I'm going to ask you to avoid.
I knew I'd get myself into trouble, but it had to be said.
I'm going to ask you to avoid naming specific members of council.
But anyway, in any case, my journey with the city of Calgary has not been an easy one. When my mom showed up in '56, our home, we had to have at least 3 or 4 other families in order to be able to pay the mortgage and do the work, because under John Diefenbaker, there was no work for 2.5 years in this city over there, and the immigrants suffered heavily on it. I started, not only, my family has built most of the infrastructure from inside Saskatchewan all the way to the mountains. Most of my neighbors, or the street I am living constantly now, as we know each other for 40 plus years. I've been in Calgary for 70 years, and I saw some great growth and some bad growth. Some of the problems in housing, for low-cost housing, was caused by city council. When we had excessive housing for the poor, they sold it for $30,000 and $40,000, and there's some members who would remember that. There were neighbors and friends of mine and employees that used to live at Midfield Park along Blackfoot Trail. They removed all the trailer parks, which was cheap, affordable housing. And is Midfield Park, did they put another 10 or 15,000 residents that they easily could? It's city land. We've had a plan with available parking to take, the housing in the city, planned for 30 years. All we received was this notice from the city of Calgary: this is what we're going to do with your property. The planning that went in it was the same as a builder who's going to go and build his house in the wintertime on a frozen, quicksand. When it thawed out, guess what happened? There was no planning involved. If you want to see some proper planning for people, take a lesson in Vaughan that they're making all their homes for lower cost and so on out of concrete that is precast, and they snap it together at less cost, but they'll be around 10 years and 50 years down the road. I think the Colosseum is still standing in Italy. If I remember correctly, Italians invented concrete. The houses are being built now are nothing but fire traps. They are just on Edmonton Trail. Yesterday, at 4 o'clock in the morning, it burnt down. you know, and here you got people all displaced as a result. If you're going to build, make it, the cheapest solution is build it right the first time. You don't coat your houses with vinyl siding that is nothing but coating them in gasoline. At least you can use concrete stucco. It'll give you 4 hours of protection, and it's cheaper. They come to the city asking, oh, we got to redo our buildings because it's the 4th time they were damaged with hail. Well, you didn't learn your lesson the first time. It's not the responsibility of the taxpayer to bail you out. You should have listened to the stories of the 3 little pigs. I'll tell you which one was which. Anyway, in summing up, I'm just trying to say that you needed to get permission. I'm totally against this rezoning. You have a covenant with the people. We have on our street, it states clearly that you must get written permission from all the residents to change the land use. We're not the United States, we're Canada, where a contract is a contract, and I really appreciated the comments of the further gentleman to understand that that's the reason. I moved from Victoria Park in order to be able to have my home, and I have 15 trees on my property. I planted 5 fruit trees after my grandkids. And I don't want to see, I keep getting calls at 6 o'clock, do you want to sell your home? We can put 17 units on it. I'd rather have my grandkids playing in the backyard. I want to see them tired so they come in and eat. I don't have to beg them to eat. They'll destroy everything that way, you know? And so we got to take into account the quality of life. During the '88 Olympics, Mr. Charlie Rose stated, I wish us Americans were more like you Canadians at caring, gentle people. You bend backwards in order to help each other. But at the same time, you know, we'll stand up and say, hey, you know, they get a failing grade. We get an A, eh? So, you know, I expect a council, most ran on the premise of repealing the zoning law.
Thank you.
We
Thank
expect
you so
them to
much,
keep it.
Enrico. Unfortunately, you're at time. But don't go far. There may be questions
I could go for a couple of hours.
I know you can. And please say hi to Eric for me.
Well, the city did expropriate our home, and they still didn't pay us for it.
We will ask Megan to join us now.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name is Megan. I'm on panel 27. I am a born and raised Calgarian. I've lived in Altadore, Britannia, Lakeview, Bridgeland, Beltline, and currently Capitol Hill, Ward 7. I'm a social work student at the University of Calgary. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment with my partner. We pay $1,500 in rent, with utilities adding between $150 to $250 to our monthly costs. My partner and I hope to own a home together in the future, but at the very least, we want to be able to afford to rent a townhouse, a duplex, main floor, or a house. We want the space to be able to work comfortably from home, enjoy a quiet living space with access to a backyard for a dog, gardening, and so on. With the cost of living and lack of affordable housing, we feel that this dream is unattainable. Protecting Calgary's housing strategy means more affordable housing and increased urban density. I'm fortunate to own a car, but it's very expensive to drive around our city as my main mode of transport, not to mention the environmental impacts. I would love for our communities and city to be easily and effectively navigated by transit, but I have found that that is not the case in my personal experience. Urban density would allow our city to be more walkable, further lessening the environmental impact of greenhouse gas emissions. I love Calgary because of our proximity to nature. Blanket rezoning is one major step among many that municipalities can take to protect these natural spaces, address climate change, and create more affordable housing. Everyone deserves housing, especially as 2026 is forecasted to be the hottest year that Calgary has experienced. That is why I am opposed to the repealing of blanket rezoning without a replacement plan, such as a landlord licensing system or a maximum heat temperature bylaw, in order to protect renters and low-income people and families. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Now we'll call on Tala to jump in.
All right. Just give me a moment to get set up here.
Thank you so much. You have 5 minutes.
Okay. Mayor and members of council, my name is Tala Abuyani. I'm the president of the Students Association at Mount Royal University. Students at Mount Royal live all over the city. They don't just live on Ward 8. I want to speak to you tonight against the repeal of Calgary's citywide rezoning. I want to start with a simple image. A student sitting at a kitchen table late at night, laptop open, refreshing rental listings that are already out of budget. They are not looking for luxury. They are looking for a chance, a room they can afford, a home close enough to class, work, childcare, or transit. A place that lets them stay in the city and keep building their life here. This is what this debate is really about. In May 2024, Council approved citywide rezoning as part of Calgary's housing response. We spent days, like we are about to, speaking about this. And it was one of the 98 actions in the city's housing strategy. Then, on December 15, 2025, Council initiated a process to repeal it. With this public hearing beginning on March 23rd, yesterday, this is not a small procedural reset. It is a decision about whether Calgary will respond to a housing crisis with consistency and courage or with hesitation. Calgary itself says that we are expecting to reach 2 million residents sooner than anticipated. The city's housing strategy is explicit. We need more homes, more housing choice, and more options for people with different incomes and household needs. Repealing citywide rezoning pulls against that reality. It sends a message that we acknowledge the crisis, but we are unwilling to keep the tools that help address it. And let us be clear about what citywide rezoning does and does not do. It does not eliminate review. It does not eliminate development permits. It does not erase neighborhood input. The city states that proposed developments still go through a development permit process and are still reviewed in detail for compatibility with surrounding communities. What rezoning does is reduce unnecessary barriers, lower delays, and make it easier to create more homes in more forms across the city. That matters deeply for students. Students are often treated as temporary residents in housing conversations, when in reality they are workers, renters, researchers, work volunteers, and future long-term Calgarians. If we want a city that is livable and economically strong, then students must be able to live in it. That means not only more housing, but more purpose-built student housing. It means recognizing that some students are also parents or caregivers, and student-oriented housing should make best efforts to include units suitable for students with dependents. It also means the city should better capture the specific housing needs of post-secondary students and its housing needs work, because what is not measured is too often ignored. This is why renter protections matter. Calgary's housing needs assessment recognizing that, in part through affordability pressure on households and safer rental conditions, matter just as much as the supply. If this council is serious about housing, then it should not only preserve tools that support more homes, but also continue conversations around measures like land licensing that can improve safety and accountability for renters across the city. We are already seeing that signs that rezoning is producing real activity. And with this, those are exactly the kind of homes that help bridge the gap between detached houses and high-rise apartments. In other words, this policy is not abstract. It is already helping produce the kind of housing choice Calgarian says it needs. So I urge Council to not repeal citywide rezoning. Do not make it harder, slower, and more uncertain to build homes in a city that already needs more of them. Do not tell students, renters, young families, and future Calgarians that their need for housing can wait while we relitigate whether housing choices belong in every community. And I want to end here where I began, with that student at the kitchen table, refreshing listing after listing, hoping something in the city will fit. This vote will tell them whether Calgary is prepared to make room for them. Thank you. And I won't be able to take questions tonight, but I welcome any questions to come to me to president@samru.ca, so president@samru.ca. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Tala. All right, this concludes our panel. We will begin assembling our next one here. So I believe we have Blaine Sers with us. Yep, Blaine, you're first up for our next panel here. We'll begin calling more names. Do we have Kate Stenson with us on panel 27? Cole Bowkett. Sorry, was that you, Kate, on the line? No, don't think so. Do we have Cole Bowkett with us? Okay, we have Cole. Jesse Prost. Aitaza Shah. Stephen Carter Edwards. Daniel Grandon. Great, come on down, Daniel. Paul Dunn. Great. So those 5, Paul, Daniel, Jesse, Cole, and Blaine, those are the 5 speakers for our next panel. This is likely to run us through to 9:30 p.m. and at that point we will break for the night. So if your name hasn't been called, there's unlikely going to be an opportunity to hear from you tonight. So tomorrow we'll start at 9:30 in the morning. So I do apologize for not being able to get to everybody today. All right, why don't you start us off, please, Blaine.
Good evening, Council. My name is Blaine Sers. I want you to repeal the blanket rezoning. Full stop. I started life in Calgary at the General Hospital. Was a toddler in Hillhurst Sunnyside, and then Briar Hill from grade kindergarten to grade 5, then rural, and then back into Calgary, Forest Heights while I was in university, then Bankview, then Douglasdale, then Oak Ridge, then Lake Bonavista Downs, and now currently in Bridgeland. And the idea that we could have a one-size-fits-all for all of the communities is just ridiculous for anybody that's been in all of these different communities that you well know. As far as making development permitting more efficient, I'm sure there's umpteen different ways to do that. I hear talk about affordable housing over and over and over again. I see an older house that is actually affordable to buy and fix up or rent out, get knocked down and get replaced by 2, 3, or 4, or 8 units that all cost more individually than the one that got knocked down, and they're more expensive to rent. So I don't see how it ends up making things more affordable. Another thing I hear is people talk about, most of the people that are in favor of the blanket rezoning, they seem to be very conscious about the environment and concerned about CO2. But I have not yet gotten from any of them a calculation of the CO2 footprint of knocking down an old house, hauling it to the dump, and then building a complete new building. You'll never, it doesn't matter how inefficient that old house was or how efficient the new ones are, you'll never recover that, the greenhouse gases that got expended when you did that knockdown and construction. I live on a short cul-de-sac. Maybe, like right now, there was 7 houses on it, and so with 3 permits per house, that's 21 permits, and there was 8 spots on the street. With the 2 houses across the street getting knocked down, with upwards of 8, and one of them is approved for 8 units. I'm not sure how many units the other one is going to be. There's going to soon be 51 permits, potential permits, vying for 2 spots in front of my house. That's insane. And I brought this up before council when I was speaking against those developments, but I don't think anything's been done about it. If someone wants to build a new house on a lot, and then they have a front drive, and so their property doesn't have any actual street frontage, then they should be restricted to just 2 guest permits. It doesn't make sense. You can't have 51 or upwards of 50 permits vying for 2 spots. That's just not going to work. The other thing I think should be considered, which probably isn't, is that when an older house that's paying X number of dollars for property taxes gets knocked down, and then you put in 3 or 4 new units, the city gets 3 or 4 times the property tax revenue, but they didn't have to actually put in any, in most of the times, any new infrastructure. They're still using the same water pipes, the same sewer pipes. There's some maybe new infrastructure right to that specific development, but that's paid by the developer. And so the tax increase, the bulk of that tax increase should stay in the community. Shouldn't go to the city for their general expenses. Sure, a portion can, because the people who live there, the increased number of people there will increase the demand on general services. But the bulk of that tax revenue should stay in the community. And I think just that change in accounting alone will change the dynamics of how things are done. That's about it.
Thank you so much for being here with us. Don't go far. We'll call on Cole next, please.
Greetings to you all on City Council that have been kind enough to join us here tonight. My name is Cole Boette. I'm a renter in Ward 7. I'm also disabled and on AISH and a part of the City Central chapter of Acorn. I'm here to ask the City Council not to repeal the blanket rezoning and to ask them to instead do a landlord licensing program to help assist it along the way in Calgary to protect renters living in substandard conditions. We're still in a housing crisis and need to use every tool available instead of getting rid of the ones that we already have. Blanket rezoning is one of those tools, but it doesn't go far enough. Keeping blanket rezoning will not solve the housing crisis or create affordable housing overnight or at the level we need, but repealing it will make housing more expensive across the board as far as I can understand. Just because rezoning is not a magic solution does not mean that it isn't part of the solution. And it doesn't mean we should just repeal it because it didn't fix it overnight. When there is a shortage of housing, low and middle income renters suffer the most. When there is nowhere else to go, you are more likely to put up with the lack of repairs, harassment from landlords, bad conditions, because there simply is no alternative. Renters are afraid to ask for too many repairs or stand up for their rights because they are afraid to lose their housing in this housing crisis. That's why we need not only this to stay, but for landlord licensing to kind of back it up and hold them to a certain standard. If we're going to make the housing crisis worse by slowing down construction of the housing, then we need to take steps to protect the renters who are most vulnerable during this housing crisis. There is an astonishing lack of affordable options for renters, especially those of us with disabilities and thus very limited income. If my significant other and I didn't live with our roommate, we would both end up homeless. The few options we do have are substandard at best. The issues have yet to be addressed or solved over the 3 years of my current residence. From infestation to insulation, we've seen it all and then some, but can do very little about it. With management flat out refusing to take responsibility for these issues and the failures of previous owners. But to this I ask, well then, who's responsible for it, if not the people who own the building and the teams that they hire? Many people wonder, well, why stay? Because we are in a financial prison. We can barely afford to stay, but moving is not affordable at the best of times, and let me assure you, these are not the best of times. Lack of accountability, ADAP, no rent control, and a surprising lack of bylaws around housing all contribute to what I consider to be a slow and lazy extermination of the low to middle income individuals. In closing, I again implore you, do not repeal blanket rezoning during a housing crisis and instead begin a study of landlord licensing program to protect the renters who are at risk in a housing crisis.
Thank you so much. We'll call on Jesse next.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Jesse Prost. I'm a resident in Ward 7 and a member of the Central Chapter of Acorn. I'll be speaking tonight more on the impact of seniors and people with disabilities. I have worked at 7-Eleven doing the night shift and helping seniors and people with disabilities in my free time with cleaning and delivering produce to them at cost for over a decade. I do this in an attempt to help increase their quality of life. From what I have heard and talked about with a wide variety of people I have met and served in both endeavors, most people feel that they have been abandoned or are not allowed to live in nice homes, apartments, until blanket rezoning helped them get a chance at better living conditions. The average pension is around $1,500, which will match AISH going into ADAPT in January 2027. With the average rent starting point being between $1,400 to $1,500, I see a massive issue there. Do any of you? If we don't keep up the building pace, then these people are going to be stuck living in rundown homes, apartments, or old hotel suites that have 3 rooms, a main room, a bedroom, and a bathroom. They don't have a proper stove, no amenities, and are dealing with management staff that look over multiple other buildings and are burnt out and never there for them. This is a negative impact on the seniors' quality of life. I have 2 requests for City Council today. My first request is to not repeal the blanket rezoning approved by City Council in 2024. We are in a massive housing crisis. This is only going to get worse as more people move to the city looking for work and a better life. Blanket rezoning removes one of the 3 main steps to building homes. Communities still have as much impact with blanket rezoning as they would without. If developers are holding the community reviews in small venues or just straight up ignoring that step and not caring about the privacy of communities, then the council should be handing down punishments to these developers for doing so. Now, let's be clear. Blanket rezoning is not the answer to affordable housing, but it is one of the few tools we have to make it possible. Repealing it solely hurts the future of the city by costing it more money and taking much longer to build the homes we need. This causes harm to low and moderate income families and people. It forces families and people to either move away or continue living in run-down, broken, or pest-infested homes and buildings that landlords refuse to fix or force the tenants to handle on their own and paid for by those tenants. It also means that they are forced to handle and endure harassment and isolation tactics from these terrible landlords and management companies. My second request is to seriously look into a comprehensive research study in a landlord licensing system to help protect the most vulnerable renters from what I just stated before, and increasing the basic quality of the units and hold irresponsible landlords accountable. It's clear that a landlord license is necessary so that landlords have to take accountability and stop the blame shifting games that they all like to play. Because at the end of the day, that building is someone's home. It's not a business where cutting corners is allowed just because you own it. We require a valid driver's license for people to drive cars and to keep other people safe and hold them accountable, hold bad drivers accountable. Why don't we have a license program to keep people safe in their own homes and hold irresponsible landlords accountable? To review, please do not repeal the blanket rezoning approved in 2024. We need to improve it. We need more homes, and we need them quickly. We also need to start a serious comprehensive research study into a landlord licensing system to help protect the most vulnerable renters. After all, the best way of gauging a civilization's success is by how the most vulnerable people are treated. And right now, we're failing, and failing hard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll call on Daniel next, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Thank you for taking this long time to hear the residents out. I'm a native Calgarian, born and raised here. My background was in architectural design programming and construction project management through the Faculty of Environmental Design. I've had the privilege of working with some of the finest architects, contractors, engineers throughout Alberta, the Northwest Territories, and in BC. Coming out of retirement, I'm looking at trying to provide a modular solution to not tiny homes, but starter homes that will hopefully be affordable than conventional ones and as quickly as possible. I spoke to council originally in 2024 for the blanket rezoning in hopes that that would have stimulated more projects coming up. However, I didn't expect to see that there was no safeguards in place, and in communities like in Capitol Hill where Granted, it's adjacent to 16th Avenue, number 1 highway. You had single-family homes getting crushed by 16 plexes. So 4 on one at the front of the lot and 4 on the back lane going in. And it was one after another throughout. It wasn't just on feeder roads or routes. It's something that, you know, we hope that the builders or developers would approach it in such a way that they're not ruining the neighborhoods that they're coming into, that they're going to be good neighbors. In that regard, I've come up with a few things because everything seems so polarized in this world. It's yes or no, it's black or white. There's nothing in the middle anymore, whether it's middle housing or the missing middle of even single-family homes, for that matter. The other thing I wanted to mention is if we repeal this blanket rezoning, we are in jeopardy of losing the $821 million from CMHC. I think that's the correct number. By doing so. So I don't know if you get an extension from the feds to retweak it in such a way that it will still fulfill the mandate or not, and how long that they would allow it, or if just removing the blanket rezoning nullifies the agreement and we stand to lose the money specifically for affordable housing. So in closing, I wanted to look forward to a quality density path for it. So in that regard, it refuses to choose between federal infrastructure funding and the long-term livability of an established neighborhoods. We are at a crossroads where blanket rezoning must not mean blanket disregard for community standards. The federal reality, we recognize the gravity of the $861 million in Federal Housing Accelerator Fund, half support. Losing this investment is not an option for our city in a housing crisis. However, the federal mandate is to increase unit counts. It is not a mandate to abandon the architectural and environmental integrity of our streets. What I'm looking at is proposing some guardrails, if that might work, with the existing blanket rezoning, to come up with a monumental solution. So to ensure this transition is a success, I am advocating for quality standards for densification that serve essentially as guardrails. Infrastructure and parking. We must ensure that site-specific parking requirements that reflect the reality of our current transit capacity. Density without parking strategy is simply congestion. Green space, I know it's been mentioned for the last number of days, and permeable surfaces. Green roofs are becoming popular now. There's a real good example, the Boette on 15th Avenue and 2nd Street in Victoria Park, Beltline.
Thank you, and unfortunately you're at time.
Okay.
But please don't go far.
Okay, well, I just had 2 other things for design standards, but that's okay. Thank you.
All right, Paul, coming up.
Last speaker of the night, if you may. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Paul Dunn, and I'm a resident of Ward 8. I'm asking council for clarity, consistency, and a true restoration of the rules that existed before blanket rezoning. Calgary needs more housing, including more affordable housing, but we need to plan for growth in a responsible way. But Calgary is already taking real steps in that direction prior to August of 2024. In many cases, that planning has involved direct community input, local area plans, consultations on specific projects, and a process that, while not perfect, at least gave people a meaningful sense that their voices mattered. That matters because the issue is not only about land use, but it's also about trust. Many Calgarians believe that trust was badly damaged when blanket rezoning was approved. They participated in hearings, wrote submissions, and took the process seriously. Many felt their concerns were brushed aside. When that happens, the damage is broader than one planning decision. People began to doubt whether public participation has any real effect at all. This council now has an opportunity to rebuild that trust. In my respectful view, the best way to do that is by repealing blanket rezoning clearly and completely. A clean rollback is easier to explain, easier to understand, and more transparent for residents, builders, and communities alike. This is important because not all neighborhoods are the same. Calgary's neighborhoods differ in age, layout, character, infrastructure, and housing form. That diversity is not a weakness, it is one of Calgary's strengths. Some areas are well suited to additional density and already seeing it, often identified in local area plans. Other areas will evolve more gradually over time. Targeted planning allows council to focus on growth where it fits best. It allows infrastructure, traffic, schools, and servicing to be considered properly. It also allows communities to be part of the discussion in a meaningful way. Blanket rezoning, on the other hand, removes distinctions between very different areas, creates uncertainty at the neighborhood level, and leaves many residents feeling that they've lost any real say over what happens on their own streets. There are also practical concerns as well. Parking, traffic, pressure on water, sewer, and roads, loss of mature trees and green space, and the disappearance of older, smaller homes replaced by more expensive units. These should not be dismissed as resistance to change. They are legitimate planning concerns and deserve to be treated with respect. We should continue building housing in a way that is deliberate, evidence-based, and community-informed. This means using local area plans properly and focusing first on corridors, transit areas, strategic sites, and places already identified for growth. This means recognizing that housing supply is important, but so is public confidence in the planning system. Good planning is not just about speed, it's about judgment, balance, and legitimacy. The key theme here is balance. Balance between growth and livability, between more housing and neighborhood character, between citywide goals and local realities, between moving forward and bringing the public with you. In my submission, that balance is best achieved by repealing blanket rezoning, returning to a more targeted, collaborative, and evidence-based approach. Please repeal the 2024 blanket rezoning in its entirety and restore the previous low-density residential districts that existed before August of 2024. And please limit the exceptions to this repeal to the following properties that had obtained approval for development permit, building permit, or subdivision, and had actually commenced construction at the time of the first reading of the repeal of the bylaw. Calgarians deserve a clear answer, not a partial rollback. I ask Council to base this decision on sound planning and community input actually received, and not on outside funding influence. By doing that, Council could begin to restore trust, show the public input matters, and to lead a planning process that is both thoughtful and responsible. Thank you very much for your time and consideration this evening.
Thank you very much. Councillor McLean, please, for this panel.
Yeah, I think it was Mr. Grandon. Thanks for speaking. Thanks everybody for speaking. And we're getting a lot of conversation about the housing. You mentioned some numbers. I just wanted to maybe talk a little bit, like you said, like a few quarters of $1 billion. I just, you understand like the half funding from the federal government was to accelerate, to incentivize us to build homes.
Right, yeah.
Okay. And I'm not here to, just to let you know, we had targets, and I think it was 42,667 regular homes. That was our target
per year, or
for this last year, and we built 61,500. We shattered it, or 3 years, sorry. And then our target for multi-unit housing, transit was 10,600. We built 25,000. We shattered, because we're all talking about building homes, just so you know how well we're doing.
Yeah.
Missing middle, our target was 16,000 and change. We built 19,000. So the targets, there was about 250 some million. Is that what was allocated to incentivize? Some of that's been paid. I think there's maybe 120 some thousand. I think 2 payments of 64 million each outstanding. But those were to hit targets. So again, we can all debate the contracts, but I think most of my position, and most of, I think, anybody that's reasonable saying if you're going to incentivize us to build houses, we just shattered all of our targets. Everybody's talking about building more homes. We've shattered them in all metrics. So whether that was blanket rezoning or not.
Councillor McLean, I'm going to ask you to ask a question.
Yeah, well, the question was, I guess, just, and again, maybe it wasn't so much, I could rephrase it into a question. I just wanted to just clarify that it wasn't $750 million we're going to lose. But my question was, did you have a good time coming down here?
It would be a portion of it then?
Wasn't real quick. I just wanted to do some clarifications, and I could phrase that as a question, but I'll just ask the question. Did you have fun coming down here today?
Yes, actually, I did, to meet the new council. And our great mayor. I missed the stories, in the Herald. And I'm getting kind of punchy now because I fell asleep at 5 in the morning and up at 9:30.
Well, we all appreciate everybody coming down here. And again, I should have phrased it all into a question, but just to, and again, it wasn't of any disrespect, to clarify some numbers.
So
and we all want to build some more.
861 million from CHC is not an issue.
And we want to build a bunch more homes. I think we're on the same page here. But again, as long as you had fun, I'm having fun.
Yeah, I'm working on getting a new process of modular structures coming out here very, very quickly. And AI is coming to our aid. And no, it's not the ATCO or the sprung approach. It's actual modular structures that are based on renewable materials and sustainability.
So all sorts of new cool technologies coming on board. In the modular, that's all part of housing forums. Look forward to seeing what the future brings to us. But again, thank you so much for coming down.
Well, I'm hoping that this will make a difference in the long run because we're close, but not close enough. And honestly, I think people do have their concerns, but this is not in my backyard is what I get from hearing from some of the people here. Lived in their homes so many years. Well, no one's going to build a high rise in Mount Royal or, in Roxborough. There's lots for sale there, but I can't imagine a 8-plex going down there without the whole neighborhood and, jumping up in arms if it did, because it's riverfront.
Where did you say you lived again? Sorry? What neighborhood again did you say?
Roxborough.
Roxborough.
Yeah.
Like, Alta-Door, we drove through there. And so we talk about gentle density. Would you say that's gentle or that's pretty good? That's
very good. Yeah, I know quite a few of my old bosses live there.
Yeah, there's a compromise in here somewhere, and we're going to try to find it. So.
Exactly. So yeah, and if I think we're on the right course. You guys are new to tackle this as part of fresh out of the gate. Stay the course. We can address what Calgarians really at the heart of the matter. At the end of the day, we should be able to meet their expectations.
Yeah, and again, I just could have phrased it more in a question, but just for everybody, we need to build homes. We are building a lot of homes. Prices are coming down, so hopefully everything will work. So yeah, especially with AI.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. I'll go to Deputy Mayor Schmidt, please.
Perhaps just Mr. Grandon, given that not so much of a question, but since you debated well, you did mention you had 2 points for some design features that you wanted to raise that you ran out of time for. So just to give you an opportunity to do that. Sure.
Just give me a minute. Can't recognize me. Too much on the bangs on the eyes, I think. Some of this already came up. Parking and amenities. Instead of a blanket no to density, suggest maybe we use parking based on per unit. Now, a half a parking stall is not viable. I think if it was closer community to city center or the university or wherever people are going to be riding their bikes more likely, that ratio might work for new development. Being an environmentalist, I'm really big on losing our urban forest. I've got a solution I'm working on that hopefully will remediate that. But if we're able to, if a tree is gone, mandate from the city that you have to replace a tree of a similar, it's not going to be a 50-foot tree, but at least a 20-foot tree, not a little something that the school kids get. That would go a long way with the neighborhood, I think. It's addressing that concern that, we're losing this, it's losing that, it's taking away from their neighborhood. Zero lot line building is something that I think I've heard horror stories here where there's no privacy. I think we would need to mandate something to the effect of having privacy and character. So a side yard fence, setbacks for privacy screening for multi-unit builds especially, allows the 4 units per lot as the minimum federal mandate. And that's what I was trying to address Mr. McLean's comments. And then again, the federal funding safety. The CMHC has explicitly stated that to remain compliant, Calgary must not, I can't read that, single family only, and must allow at least 4 units per lot without additional public hearings. As long as the guardrails don't turn into a hidden veto or a slowdown tactic, we should all be on solid ground on that. In a summary, I think we should be looking at monumental solutions. I've always been faced with coming up with solutions to problems, even when it wasn't my wheelhouse. If there's anything I can do, I've worked with, like I said, in my career, with some of the finest architects, engineers, planners, contractors, the whole range, and even city officials. So I'm hoping we can stay the course here, and the infrastructure within the existing areas, the original areas, if they're coming up, perhaps we might be able to work out a solution where the developer will need to pay more if he's going to have units that exceed the capacity for the existing infrastructure. Hopefully that will also address some of the neighbors' needs that, oh no, this new row house here is going to jeopardize our ability to water our plants or whatever. And shading. Shading's the last one. But with heat domes and everything else, I think people might be looking forward to having shading coming down the road. So I think that's about it for guardrails at just a superficial level. I think if we put our minds to it, there could be other ones that were brought up within the last 2 days that in essence should be able to be fitted in, and then have administration, give administration the power to make sure they are put in. If the developer says, no, well, no, you don't get to develop it. You guys are the authority, authorizing body. You should be able to be in a position to make the compromises that the communities are looking at, and not burden the contractors too much or the developers too much in achieving that. I think there's that middle ground. If we could do a win-win scenario where we can collaborate instead of compete, I think that would really capture what Calgary's about.
Well, thank you, Mr. Grandon, and given I'm your counselor, more than happy to receive your feedback. So thanks for coming tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate that.
All right, that concludes the panel. It's 9:16.
Oh, sorry. I was just wanted to see if the one person in the...
Yep. I was just going to ask colleagues, we don't have time for a full panel here. We could just do one at a time until 9:30. Are you guys okay with that? And then we're going to bang it at 9:30?
Yep.
You're good? Yeah, perfect. Awesome. So I'm just going to list names, and we're going to go one person at a time. I don't want to commit to a full panel because that might bring us past 9:30, but we're going to attempt to hear from as many people as possible that are in the chamber before 9:30. Yep. All right, do we have Tony Morris with us? Nope. Gabriella Wong-Ken on panel 29.
Mayor?
Is that you, Gabriella?
No, I'm Stephen Carter-Edwards. Somehow I got missed out on being on panel 28.
All right, Stephen, go ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you very much. So I do have some slides from Springbank Hill.
Thank you. We'll queue those up, but you can get started now.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mayor and Councillors, my name is Stephen Carter-Edwards. I'm a director with the Springbank Hill Community Association. I'm a VP, and I also do planning and development. We do have a slide presentation that deals with the Springbank Hill Community Association.
Thank you. It's up on our screen now.
Oh, thank you. So are we on slide 1?
Yes.
Because I know there's a delay, so I can't see what you're seeing. We did provide a letter, and this letter was signed by our community association and 2 others in Ward 6. And that letter is at attachment 21, pages 159 to 161. So as you're probably aware, community associations, including ours, we rely on administration and the Calgary Planning Commission to provide the requisite oversight over developers and their plans. So my comments are going to be directed towards the impact of the blanket rezoning, which apparently has resulted in the developers, they're focusing on amending LAPs and SAPs to change existing communities to a vision of greenfield. Can we have slide 2?
Yes.
So you may or may not be aware, Springbank Hill was established in 1999. It was annexed on land to the city of Calgary from Rocky View. And at the time of the annexation, there were several large acreages on rural roads, and some of which are actually still existing to this day. But of course, over the course of time, they are getting fixed. The Community Association was formed in 2001. The area structure plan was completed in 2017. And as you can see, by 2010, there were over 9 neighborhoods being established. There were these ones. There was Springbank Hill, Elmont, Anatapi. You can see Timberline Estates under construction. If we go to the next slide. So if you're looking at slide 3, so this is last year. So several neighborhoods had already been added from 2010, and several were approved or under construction. So now you can see there's over 5,000 households being proposed, approved, or under construction. And if we go to the next slide. So now we're looking at 2025 to 2028. So with a combination of upzoning and patchwork piecemeal changes to the area structure plan, it's going to double the density of Springbank Hill. So as you are probably well aware, this leads to waste and recycling collection issues, traffic, parking congestion, shadowing, loss of privacy, loss of tree canopy, and green spaces. If we can go to the next slide, slide 5. So as an example, in contravention of the ASP, Truman Homes has proposed the addition of over 1,500 households on a 53-hectare acreage site, or 29.5 units per hectare on average. In this area, the ASP contemplated 7 to 17 units per hectare. And so, notwithstanding, what they're proposing, they've gone ahead, and this land has already been stripped of all the trees. And I've looked on DMAP, I've looked on my property. There's been no DP for stripping and grading. I do have to make a correction. There has been a biophysical impact assessment study that was submitted to the city late last year. I haven't seen it yet, though, and I don't know if it was before or after all the trees were cut down. If I can go to slide 6. So as I've mentioned, traffic. Springbank Hill, it's a large development. It's between 17th Avenue, 69th Street Southwest, the Ring Road, and the only ways to get to the Ring Road are via 17th Avenue or 69th Street by driving through the neighborhoods. And so a lot of neighborhoods are getting a lot of traffic, and doubling the number of units here, of course, will double the number of
Stephen,
traffic that's going
unfortunately,
on.
you're at time.
Okay, thank you, sir.
I don't see any questions for you, so we'll attempt to hear from one more speaker. Councillor Panazopoulos, go ahead.
Thanks so much. Just thought if you wanted to wrap up your presentation, love to hear your final thoughts on Springbank Hill. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I just really would like to go to the next slide, which, if it's slide 7, hopefully. It's just our proposal that you should do a sequential approach if you decide to rescind the blanket rezoning. And we've had some discussion on this over the last couple of days that I've been monitoring, and I totally agree with the speakers. It's not enough to just rescind the blanket rezoning. You should really look at RCG, and there should be public input on that. It should be not just up to administration and council. You should have a public hearing on that. And I know others have brought that to your attention as well. And I thank you very much for your time, and thank you for accommodating me.
Maybe just one follow-up. In your slide, you say review and update both LAPs for these communities. I know your communities is fairly recent. Maybe just talk about that, the LAP process, why you want an update, and what would your expectations be coming out of that in addition to what we have today?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, all we're saying is, the Springbank Hill ASP was put together in 2017, and there was an ASP, and I know other communities have LAPs, and I've done a lot of watching Calgary Planning Commission and a lot of council on what's going on these days with development, and it just seems that somebody comes along and they say, well, yeah, the ASP says this and the LAP says that, but it's just a bump in something, and then it gets approved. And all I'm saying is, well then, what's the point of all the volunteer time and everything that went into creating the LAPs and the ASPs when they're not respected? I mean, you'll see that it's going to be coming to council, and we showed you that with the Truman one. It's just a massive change in the ASP, and I get it. We need density and whatnot, but the Springbank Hill, just as an example, we appreciated. We wanted density, and so we created the ASP with density along 17th Avenue, in the LRT where it made sense. Now they're plunking it in the middle of what used to be a farmland and acreages, and it's only supposed to be 7 to 17 units per hectare.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your thoughts. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. In the chamber, do we have Jerry Spotowski with us? Lorraine Moulding? Chrissy Bird? Sandy Claremont. Sandy, come on up. You're going to take us home for the night. Oh, well, maybe that was unfortunate, but you have 5 minutes with us if you'd like to sneak in before 9:30. Sure. Well, we'll see you back at, we'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, no problem. We'll see you first thing tomorrow. So, Council, we only have a minute or two here. I'm going to bang the gavel. We'll be back at 9:30 tomorrow.